Welcome to Touchline. I'm your host, Anthony Totera, here in the Soccer Hall of Fame with Soccer Hall of Fame member John McGrane. John, thanks for joining us here on Touchline.
That's my pleasure, Anthony.
Thank you for coming. John, let's talk about the old days gone by in the Canadian Soccer League, and I enjoyed the competition you and I had. You with the Hamilton Steelers, myself with the North York Rockets, and you brought a lot of passion and love and energy to that team. Talk a little bit about those days.
Well, it was my first experience in coaching and being a general manager after having a successful career in playing. And at the end of the day, it was a rewarding experience. I got to meet a lot of really quality people, and I think it was great soccer in Canada at that time.
Well, you better believe it. I still think, John, that was the best coast-to-coast league we ever had in this country. Your thoughts?
No doubt, no doubt. I mean, you look at the Toronto Blizzards, you looked at the North York Rockets, the Vancouver 86ers,
yeah.
Then we had the Hamilton Steelers, and the interesting part is that when I came into coaching the Steelers, I believe we had about 5 or 6 players on that team who are now in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, sir. One player that sticks to my mind, and you and I talked about that before taping, is Lucho Iannero. Here was a guy, he didn't have all the talent in the world, but he came to work every game. He brought his lunch bucket and he gave it all he had. Mention some of the players like Lucho that you had an opportunity to coach and you enjoyed.
Well, you're right about Luch. I mean, Luch is the perfect example of what a soccer player is all about. He's not 250 pounds, he's not 6'6". It means it's a universal game. It's a game that all Canadians can play. You can be a little guy or a big guy, it doesn't matter. And Luch personified that he was small in stature but big in heart, and certainly worked very, very hard and was the backbone of our team. We also had guys like Colin Miller,
yes,
who after that went on to play for Glasgow Rangers and became coach of Canada's World Cup team. We had Alex Bunbury, who had a great career in Portugal for Marítimo. And we also had Paul Dolan, who's now the goalkeeping coach for Canada's national team. And we spoke about a few other guys. We had a young player called Peter Gilfillan who went on to play for left fullback.
Yes.
And we also had guys who you mentioned was a favourite for North York before he came to Hamilton, which was Amadeo Gasparini, who was a really quality centre forward from Argentina.
Yeah, Argentina forward, that guy had it all. John, that league back then was something special about it. We had teams coast to coast. There was probably very good attendance in some of the cities, but very bad attendance in other parts of the city. But what we did have, John, it was people like you and the players that we groomed, the Pesca Salitos, the Alex Bunburys, the Paul Dolans, and that was the closest we ever came again to getting to a World Cup was back in '86 for Mexico, and we almost got there. And it was the great Canadian Soccer League and a league like that helped it as well.
Every country has to have a player development mode.
Yes, sir. And
it has to have a pyramid system where the kids who are playing in the North York, or they're playing in Windsor, they're playing in St. Catharines, they need, if they have the talent, they need to have the pyramid system and someplace to go at the end. Right now, it's flat-topped. We get to a certain level. They have a Canadian Soccer League right now, but it's one step short of what we're talking about, which is a Division 2, one league below MLS. And I think that we have an opportunity to do that over the next couple of years, but it's dependent on this league to be successful so that we could be the feeder system for our Canadian national team.
I agree 100%, John. So many people and so many owners have tried in the past, and unfortunately a lot of them have failed. And I think they failed, John, and I think you'll agree with this, is they used it as a hobby, and they didn't really treat it as a business, a lot of them. And unfortunately, when you do that, you fail.
Well, the interesting part is being the general manager as well as the coach. I would be at the annual meetings that they would have, and these were all very, very successful people,
yes,
but they were passionate soccer fans. And it seemed like these highly successful businessmen, when they walked into that room, I think they just took their brains out and left them outside the door. And they came in and they made decisions based on being fans. That was a detriment to the league because it needed those people to be businessmen first and soccer fans next. And I think over the years it became obvious that it was going to fail, and it was a damn shame, because since then we have never been the same national program since.
You got that right, and there's never been a successful league like that since then.
No.
You've went to 2 finals. Talk about those finals. I'm sure that there has to be memories from a couple of those finals and some of the things that happened.
Well, the interesting part is when I took over coaching, I'd never coached before. I'd never taken a coaching course. I'd played 10 years in the North American Soccer League, so I had an idea on how the game would play. But I was lucky because I had a couple of really good coaches when I was playing in the NASL. One was Rinus Michels, who was the coach of Holland's famous '74 World Cup team, and as well as Claudio Coutinho, who was the coach of Brazil's World Cup team in 1978. So I was able to glean some of the stuff from these guys, and I went out and I coached, and I enjoyed the experience. We went to the final the first year I coached the Steelers. We lost to the 86ers in Vancouver 4-1. The game should have been a little bit closer than the score, but these were two quality teams that put on one heck of a game.
Yeah.
And we had over 8,000 people at Swangard Stadium.
Yeah.
It was live on TSN.
Yes.
And I think it energized the base as far as the love of the game is concerned, because in those days we didn't have the EPL on all the time and all the different things went on.
But what you said, John, 8,000 people, I bet you a lot of viewers won't believe that. And they think that back then we couldn't attract fans. But the Canadian Soccer League did attract fans, especially out in Vancouver. They attracted. And when Toronto played Hamilton, Hamilton played Vancouver, and so forth and so forth. It was great action, especially in that Hamilton-Niagara region. People supported it.
You know, the interesting part, and people probably will, a lot of the people weren't born at the time, but a lot of the older people will remember this, that first year in Hamilton, when we had the Colin Millers and the Alex Bunburys and the Gasparinis and many others, Paul James,
yes,
who ended up becoming a coach of Canada, we averaged between 3,500 and 4,500 people per game at Brian Timmins that only held 5,000 people.
Yes, sir.
And the reason why we had 8,000 in Vancouver is because it only held 8,000. We could have probably sold 20,000 tickets. So I think it all comes down to the quality of product you put on the field, the inclusion of the grassroots involved in the community of that team is the key to making a successful new coast-to-coast professional league.
John McGrane, the player, North American Soccer League days. Talk a little bit about that. I must have been a kid in a candy store with all the all-stars on different teams and on your team. I mean, you think about that, I don't think the viewers really understand, the younger ones. Franz Beckenbauer, Pele, Georgie Best. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. A lot of these beautiful players. Talk about that.
Oh, it was like a kid in a candy store growing up. When I went to the Olympic Games in '76, up until that point, I never saw myself ever looking at being a professional soccer player. I had an ability, but I didn't think it would go further than that. And then in 1977, when I was with Simon Fraser University, we won the national championship. And I got two offers. One was from Tampa Bay, who was managed by Eddie Fermani.
Yes.
And the second one was from Los Angeles, who was managed by Tommy Smith, the great Liverpool captain. And it was an easy choice for me because George Best was playing for LA at the time. And it's like a young Canadian lad getting a chance to play with Wayne Gretzky. So I took the opportunity to go to Los Angeles. I was there for 5 years. I played 2 years with George, and then Rinus Michels came in from Holland, and he brought in Johan Cruyff, and I played with Johan for a couple of years. But to play against, my first professional start was in New York Stadium,
wow.
Giant Stadium.
Giant Stadium with the
against
Cosmos.
the Cosmos, and that's when Pele, Beckenbauer, Carlos Alberto,
Giorgio
Canaglia, and it was my job that day to mark Pele. So
good night.
I hate to tell you, he scored a hat trick that day.
That's
so
okay.
I didn't do too well. So for a debut, it was not memorable. But every game was like that.
But
every game is like that.
Talk about John. You talked about Johan Cruyff, Georgie Best. Here's a young guy like yourself in the dressing room, and even after the games and the practices, I'm sure they must have taken you under their wing and talked to you and helped you and guided you. What would you take from what they taught you to try and give out to the young Ontario kids today to help them out?
It's hard today because it's an entitlement society we have.
That's
I mean,
point.
when I grew up, I went to university. I got a scholarship because my family couldn't afford to send me to school. I got the scholarship, but at the same time I got a part-time job at the university. I was scrubbing the cafeteria's floors from 12 till 6 in the morning. That was my job. It made me eat, and I would go for a sleep in the gymnasium until somebody walked in. I worked my way through the system. Today, and I'm guilty of this myself, we live in a lovely home. We have a swimming pool. Our kids don't have to pay for school. They want a car, they got a car. They want a cell phone, they get a cell phone.
Yeah.
Today, to try and get people energized into being, let's say, a professional hockey player, professional soccer player, is extremely difficult because it's a lot of hard work.
And kids don't want to do it today. You said it bang on. The kids have everything at their disposal. Everything is convenient, and that's why maybe we're not performing at the level we should at the men's level, is because we're not starting to groom these kids at an early level.
Well, the interesting part is I spoke to a couple of friends of mine who are now managing in England. One is Brian Kidd, who used to play for Manchester United in Manchester. He's the assistant coach at Manchester City right now. And we had a discussion about 5 or 6 years ago where he mentioned to me is that they're going into the inner cities now in England. And they're taking not only the best soccer players available, they're taking the best athletes.
Really?
And they don't care whether this kid can play soccer or not. As long as they're great athletes, they're going to take them and they'll teach them the game. I think it's one part of our society today that we have ignored. And the reason why they're ignored is because in order to play minor soccer in Canada today, it'll cost you $300 or $400 or $500.
I'm glad you brought that up, John, because people keep saying that it is so cheap to play soccer. It's nonsense.
No.
It's no longer cheap anymore.
No.
Very quickly touch upon that, and then in our second part, we're going to talk about CSA reform. It is not cheap, in your opinion. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I think that the best players should be subsidized from a very early age.
I agree.
And we should be teaching these kids in a player development model by the best coaches or the ex-players, or
yes,
whatever it is. We have to get some kind of a solid player development model put together that can be implemented. We can talk about it all day, but if we don't have it in place where it can be implemented now, that's a generation lost.
But it's people like John McGrane, people like Bobby Arusha, Dick Howard, all these great soccer people that we have in Canada have to start speaking loud and boisterous, like yourself, John, like Bobby, like Dick Howard, so we can make change once and for all, or else it'll never change. In our second part, John, we're going to talk about the CSA and what's happening all across this country, because I feel something that is very important for soccer in this country, and it's starting to turn. In our second part here in the Soccer Hall of Fame with John McGrane.